All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to go back and try to recap this question. And let's take a look and see where we are relative to understanding the steps in solving this question. Now, this is a recording for you to refer back to after we have done the lesson. So as of today, technically, you all have seen this question. I'm just going back to clean it up so I can make sure that you have the video. And so, everybody learns at a different pace, different way. Sometimes I know that I like to see things and hear things maybe once or twice. So in this question, as you remember in class, I talked to you about using u substitution. So we're going to use that 1/3 x to the 1/3 as our u value. And what we want to do is we're now going to call this 5u squared plus 11u plus 2, and this is equal to 0. Using the AC method, I'm going to take the first term coefficient and the last term coefficient, and I multiply them together to get 10. And my factors for 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. I then now have to refer back to the 11, and obviously 10 plus 1 would give me 11. So what happens is that we use those two factors to stretch that middle term. So this now gives you 5u squared plus 10u plus 1u plus 2 equal to 0. Having stretched this out, I'm now going to use factor by grouping. So I'm going to split this equation right here, and I'm going to take out 5u because that's common to both terms, and this leaves me u plus 2. In other words, 5u goes into 5u squared u times, because when I multiply 5u times u, I get 5u squared. If I divide 5 into 10, I get 2. The u's would cancel, and that's how I would simplify that. Now, if you notice over here, you already have the u plus 2 in the factor, and you're probably asking yourself, well, then what do I add? Well, at least the identity, okay? And so this becomes 5u plus 1 times u plus 2. And this is obviously equal to 0, which means that technically I have u is equal to -2, right? Because we set these to 0 and solve. And I also have u is equal to -1/5. Now remember, I'm going to substitute in x to the 1/3 for u, respectively. So in reality, I have x to the 1/3 is equal to -2, and I have x to the 1/3 is equal to -1/5. I'm now going to raise both of these to the 3rd power, always the reciprocal, basically 3/1. Same thing over here. Now remember, these are multiplied, so this gives you 3/3, which is really x to the 1. And what you do to the left, you do to the right, so I have to raise this as well to the 3/1 power, or just the 3rd power. And my two solutions are -8 and -1/125. And you don't have to go back and check these, you're okay with these. Remember, this is cubic, so cubics are a little easier to work with than the squares. All right. Another way you could do this, by the way, is you don't have to necessarily use the u substitution. You could just go ahead and guess and check if you're daring enough. I mean, if you think about it, this is 5x to the 1/3 times x to the 1/3. And if I place the 2 here and the 1 here, since they're both positive, you're pretty much set with your answer right here. The inner-outer products, obviously that's going to give you 1x cubed, 1x to the 1/3, and then 10x to the 1/3, which if you add this, you do get 11x to the 1/3. The 2 times the 1, obviously that gives you the 2, and the 5x to the 1/3 times x to the 1/3 will give you your 5x to the 2/3. So you're set. At this point, you would just look at the factors. So you have 5x to the 1/3 plus 1 equal to 0. And then you have x to the 1/3 plus 2 equal to 0. And you would subtract the 1, subtract the 2 respectively, and then divide by 5 on the first one. You're still going to go back to the square one where you're doing all this stuff. All right, so I want you to try this one again if you would like. Let me write down the question for you. You should have, in this case, you should have x to the fourth minus 5x to the second power plus 6 equal to 0. All right, so just go ahead and try that one. When all is said and done, your final answers should be plus and minus square root of 2 and plus and minus square root of 3. All right, let's look at example 7. Okay, in example 7, actually, I'm sorry. I think I just gave you the wrong question to try. So let me erase this. This is the wrong try question. We already did that one. I want you to try 3x to the 2/3. That makes more sense. As I was writing it, I was questioning myself. Minus 11x to the 1/3. And again, we did this one in class. You can always refer to your notes as well. That's equal to 0. Okay, so if you pause the video, your solutions are written here, negative 1 over 27 and 64. All right, so let me go over to example 8. Example 8, we have more of the same. We're solving an equation, quadratic in form. The only thing is this time they're giving you x squared minus 5 squared plus 3 times x squared minus 5 minus 10. And this is equal to 0. All right, and so think of the u value as the x squared minus 5 portion, which is basically this stuff in here. All of this and all of this. And we would re-express this equation as u squared plus 3u minus 10 equal to 0. And again, think of the factors of 10. You have 1 times 10 and you have 2 times 5. If the 5 is positive and the 2 is negative, you can stretch that middle term. So this will give you u squared plus 5u. Actually, you don't even need to do that. You don't need to do that here. Now that I think about it, because technically you already have the answer. You have basically u minus 2 times u plus 5. There you are. Equal to 0. And then just substitute in your u. So this is really x squared minus 5 minus 2. And over here, I have x squared minus 5 plus 5. And as we always do, we set this to 0, set that to 0. So this will result in x is equal to plus or minus square root of 7. And this will result in x is equal to 0. Now, in class, I am going to cover questions 9 and 10, so let me do those on video as well. And I'm only doing that because a plan B for you to have something to try. I am going to give you a try question here before I move on, so give me 1 second. Let me write that down for you. This try question is x squared minus 4 squared plus x squared minus 4 again minus 6 is equal to 0. So go ahead and try that and pause the video, and I'm going to give you the solutions right here. So we have plus and minus 1 and plus and minus square root of 6. Those should be your two answers when all is said and done. Okay, example 9. In example 9, we're getting into absolute value. And so in absolute value equations, we're given the question absolute value of 2x minus 3 equal to 11. So what I will tell you is an absolute value, this is always plus and minus. Once the absolute value is isolated as it is here, what you simply need to do is complement it on the opposite side with the opposite sign. So in other words, over here on this side, I've got a plus 11. On the other side, I want a negative 11. Once you do that, you can literally take out the absolute value symbols and add your 3 to all 3 sides. So if you notice, in this case, you're going to get negative 8 is equal to 2x is equal to 14. Remember, the 3's do cancel right in the middle, right? You know, your next step is obviously you're going to divide by 2. So we're going to divide by 2 here in the middle, on the left and on the right, respectively. So you get your final answer where negative 4 is equal to x is equal to 7. Yes, you have to check this. Always check absolute value. So I'm going to do this to remind you. Always check for extraneous solutions. Okay, and hopefully I'm not misspelling this. Always check for extraneous solutions. So that means that you go back to the original question. We're going to go back to the absolute value of 2x minus 3. And you can do this just visually. And go ahead and plug in your negative 4. Absolute value, okay, so let's think about that. That's going to give us absolute value of negative 11, right? Because negative 8 and negative 3 is negative 11, which is 11. We're good. Do the same thing with the 7. Plug in the 7. Again, visually, just think about it. 2 times 7 is 14. 14 minus 3 is 11. Absolute value of 11 is 11. Fabulous. So those are your 2 solutions. 2 solutions are negative 4 and positive 7. All right. I would like for you to try this question. Try. And we're going to do absolute value of 2x minus 1 equal to 5. And solve for the solutions. I'll give you a few seconds and go ahead and write it down. Your answers, if you pause the video before I say the answers, should be negative 2 and 3. So show me how you got to that answer. All right, example 10. Example 10 is more of the same of what we're going to do, or what we just did. And I always want you to remind you that we are evil people. We are evil math people. We like absolute values to be isolated. So we are going to isolate that absolute value first. If you notice, you've got a lot of stuff attached to it right now, right? So the first thing you're going to do is we're going to add this 15 to both sides. That's going to be your step 1. So you have 5 times the absolute value of 1 minus 4x, and this is equal to 15. All right, next step. Who's still attached to that absolute value? That absolute value has yet to be isolated. I have to now divide by 5 on both sides. And so at this point, I have the absolute value of 1 minus 4x is equal to 3. So now at this point, what do you do? Well, we're back to example 9 at this point, aren't we? What we're going to do is we're going to complement this on this side with its opposite sign. So the positive 3 is now a negative 3 on the opposite side. So we can now ignore those absolute value pieces, and we can subtract that 1 on all 3 sides. That leaves you with negative 4 is equal to negative 4x, and that is equal to 2 on this side, on the right side. The next step is to divide by negative 4 on all 3 pieces, all 3 sides, all 3 terms. So negative 4. You're left with 1 is equal to x. X is equal to 1, and it's also equal to negative 1/2. Once again, take those two values. Let's go back, and we start with the original equation. Could do it verbally. We're missing the minus 15 equal to 0. Let's see if that's true. So if I plug in a 1 in for x, I get 5 times negative, absolute value of negative 3, which is 3, times 5, right? That times 5 is 15. 15 minus 15 is 0. So that checks out. So this is good. Negative 1/2. If I do negative 4 times negative 1/2, I get a positive 2, plus 1 is 3. 3 times 5, 15. 15 minus 15 is 0. Checks out. Done. All right. If you've mastered that, let's try this question. Let's do 4 absolute value of 1 minus 2x minus 20 equal to 0. Okay, go ahead and do that question, and I'm going to give you the solutions here. My solutions are negative 2 and positive 3. Awesome. You do have question 11 in this chapter. It's basically plugging in an answer or a value, so I'm not concerned about the question, but I'm just going to write down part of it and verbally tell you the question. So in this application question, the concept is television viewing by annual income. Okay, so this is just what the question is about. They give you a formula, and this is why I say this is just straight up plugging in. Anybody could plug in an answer. So a variable and then solve, basically. So they give you square root of I, and then they give you plus 67.6. Now, in this question, H represents, let's see, how many hours by annual income. So they give you H, and they tell you that H is equal to 44.6. Okay, big deal. Plug it in. So 44.6 is equal to negative 2.3 times the square root of the I value plus 67.6. So we're obviously going to subtract that 67.6, which if we do this, minus 67.6 minus 67.6 on both sides, we're then left with negative 23 is equal to negative 2.3 square root of I. Remember that I is the annual income in thousands of dollars, by the way. So obviously the next step would be, if I'm solving for that I have negative 2.3 attached to it. I'm going to divide by negative 2.3. That's going to give me 10 is equal to that square root of that annual income, which once I square both sides, now remember this is in thousands, so once I square that, this person makes 100,000 basically. That's the interpretation of the question. Because remember, it's whatever number you get in thousands. Again, just plugging in an answer. So I'm not too thrilled with that question, but that's what they gave you. All right, we're going to stop here.